Hello, my name is Lucas. This is a bit of late, and it's time to put up or shut up and talk about A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. If you watched my weekend wrap-up video, or you've been talking to me privately at all, in the past week or two, you know exactly how I feel about this book. But it's not time to talk about my feelings about the book. It's time to talk about what the book is talking about, which is kind of interesting, actually. So, yeah, I believe I am the only one of the group of channels that read this book without annotations. Noah, from Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, he will be talking about chapter 2 and 4 and 5, and I'll be talking about chapters 1, 3, and 5. And yeah, I believe Noah read it with annotations of some kind, and so did Una. I don't remember if Crypto did. I watched the video where they introduce a lot of concepts that you need as a primer to enjoy this book. But yeah, I mean, that was a really great video. And I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that they actually talked about. I'll try to give a little bit more detail on 2 points, but they pretty much covered everything I was going to talk about, I guess. I'll just kind of roll out some of the plot points as we go along, where some of those things they talked about are actually relevant. But anyway, like I was trying to say, I didn't read with annotations, so unlike Crypto and Una and Noah, some of the things I just didn't catch at all, and you know, that's okay with me. Less time I spend on this book, so be it. Anyway, let's talk about the book finally. So, it's a series of moments in this young man, Stephen Dedalus, who is a stand-in for James Joyce. It follows from what I understand, it follows his early life almost exactly. Few alterations, not altercations. So, you know, it's autobiographical fiction, which is certainly a style of writing that one may choose. Actually, I didn't mind the book until the 5th chapter, so please forgive me. I'm just frustrated that I had to read that chapter. Anyway, so it's these bits and pieces and moments that are very formative in Stephen's life, or James's life, that shape the young man, that shape the artist. And Dedalus, right, or Dedalus, I'm not entirely sure how you say it, his last name is a reference to the Greek, like engineer, artificer, as we learn, artificer, this inventive guy, right, who he builds this labyrinth in ancient mythology, Greek mythology, and for King Minos, or the Minotaurs or something. This I'm trying to go off memory, because I do vaguely know the story of Daedalus before this. And then the king is quite happy with that, but he doesn't, I can't remember why he traps him in there with his son Icarus. And I'm guessing it's so that the secrets of the labyrinth aren't revealed, maybe? I can't remember. Maybe he's just cruel. Anyway, that's not really the point. And then he, escapes with these wax wings, tells his son, don't fly too high or they'll melt, and then his son doesn't listen. All kinds of amazing things there, right? Really interesting character. So anyway, he's referenced to that. And by having all these different moments, these linked together, right? He's creating this James or Stephen's life by having this bond. He's creating this piece of art because he is an artist in a similar way that Daedalus creates the labyrinth, creates these wax wings with his son Icarus. Does he make other things? I can't remember. Anyway, they do kind of talk about that in the Before You Read book, Before You Read video. So yeah, there's that. And we're gonna see Daedalus, again, forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. We're gonna be seeing that come up a lot more throughout these interconnected scenes that go throughout Stephen's early life. And yeah, so let's just start talking about plot points, and then I'll bring up other things that are important. So early on, right, his father is telling him a story about moo cows and cluckos, and Stephen quite likes that. And then he starts talking about his neighbor Eileen, who is a Protestant, and this family is Catholic, and that is just a whole issue. And he's made to apologize, or he's told he will apologize, or an eagle will come out and pull his eyes out, which makes me think of another Greek myth in a way. Maybe in the annotations to some versions of this book they say this, or maybe I'm just thinking this on my own, I don't know, but it does make me think of Prometheus, who gave fire to people against the will of Zeus, who is then punished by being chained down on a mountain for a vulture to eat his liver out every day, and then at night he will recover, and then just till the end of time, you know. So yeah, again, in another way, I feel like this moment, and then of course Stephen makes a song out of it because he's an artist, but in this way I think it's another allusion to a Greek myth with Prometheus, where he's giving fire to the people, and in this case Stephen is giving, or James is giving, this book to the people to enlighten them and change their minds. And yeah, we'll just say enlighten them, much like fire would. And we will get to that definitely in chapter 5, but that's something to keep in the back of your mind. That's how I felt. I will make no comment on that. Anyway, then he's sent off to school to Clongo's Wood School. And, you know, he starts socializing a little bit, and these boys who are bullies, Wells and, oh gosh, I'm forgetting their names and I didn't write them down, but Wells is the important one in this particular chapter. They ask if his father is a magistrate, and again, this follows James's life very much. In a way, I don't believe that his father was a magistrate, but throughout this time in Stephen's life and in James's life, his family's social status starts to go down. They have to keep moving to smaller, cheaper places because of economic misfortune and these kind of things. But anyway, they ask him if he's a magistrate, which I thought was kind of interesting. I believe that their parents are all magistrates because this is fairly prim and proper boarding school. And yeah, so I've got some of my notes here. I've got my Kindle for a very important part. Oh my gosh, 10 minutes in, not even a third of the way through. That's okay, no big deal. Little unprofessional, no problem. It's just a portrait of the artist as a young man by James Joyce, no big deal. Let's see. Oh yeah. So when he's at school, he starts really thinking about his place in life, in the world, in the universe, and his relationship with God. And he starts thinking all different kinds of things about God and how people communicate with God through different languages, and what that all means. And yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting, because definitely, I mean, he's in Ireland. He's learning from all these priests, right? And he's quite young, and God is very important. God was very important in Ireland at the time. From what I understand, not so much anymore these days, but anyway. So, him questioning his faith and what his faith means, and God's powers and his place in the universe. Who is he going to be, right? And that's the future that he has to build for himself as Daedalus, right? So there is that, because this is going to be a sort of Bildungsroman. It's going to be a tale of him growing up and learning about himself and becoming who he's meant to be, in a way, and forging his own path. So, there are things that James Joyce does that I think are quite clever. It's just that James knows that he's clever, and that drives me up the wall. So, yeah, he starts questioning himself and his place in the universe, and questioning things about God, and we get the idea that he needs to start making some decisions soon. And of course, later on, we see him praying, and he has this fear of hell. He has a lot of guilt and shame and other things that we will see in, oh my gosh, so many chapters, especially chapter 3. Looking forward to that one. So he starts praying. His fingers trembled. Let me give you a little quote. His fingers trembled as he undressed himself in the dormitory. He told his fingers to hurry up. He had to undress and then kneel and say his own prayers and be in bed before the gas was lowered, so that he might not go to hell when he died. This guilt and shame and fear. Okay, that last part was not the quote. The last part was not the quote. I just wrote right after, this guilt and shame and fear will come into play later on, which is true. I mean, when we get to chapter 3, oh my God, I felt terrible for the poor boy. So yeah, we really get the sense of guilt and shame that he feels because of something that we'll see later on, and even in this chapter, in a way, the projection of himself versus his inner self, and how that is a portrait in itself, right? Because a portrait is what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like a mirror, I guess, in a way. It shows your best self, idealistically or theoretically. But it doesn't necessarily, it shows an image of you in still frame that you probably would want to show. But that isn't all of who you are, unless this is like the most wild painting that just has everything, but then it's distracting and confusing. But anyway, or portrait, anyway, confusing. So yeah, in that sense, we're definitely going to be seeing how this works, and how his outer projection versus his inner turmoil, because of who he feels that he is and who he acts like and whatever else, how these things come into play and put him in conflict with himself. So there's that. Again, I don't mind it so much. I think it's all right. Yeah, so he gets bullied by Wells and some of the other kids. They ask him if he kisses his mother, and no matter what the response is that he gives, they laugh at him. He says, I believe he says no first, and then he says, no, he says yes, and then he says no, and they laugh either way. We also get the father who is the priest that teaches him Latin. I wrote that name down. I know I did. Oh gosh, where is it? Dolan, Father Dolan, who mistreats him and punishes him for something that's not really his fault, because he becomes sick while he's here. And I think that is quite important, because the image that he gives of Dublin as a whole in this book, and of the character in a way, definitely the character of Stephen. Definitely the school is just harsh, and the parents trying to be kind, I suppose. Not exactly the best, but there's some love there. And Father Dolan, Wells, and the other boys, and just some other things that we will see later on. Not the nicest portrayal, but that said, we also Stephen was thrown into a cesspool, or he fell into a cesspool. I can't remember. I read this book a couple weeks ago, and I didn't write down. I know he was in a cesspool. I glanced through the book on my Kindle quickly. I saw cesspool and got sick, and I didn't write down how he fell in, or oh god. Anyway, next week I promise to tone down the asides, yeah, because they make me self-conscious, and then I start talking a little bit more. And I just need to talk about what the book is about, yeah? Cool. Okay, so, he falls into the cesspool. He's been bullied. And later on, he's mistreated and he's punished by Father Dolan, who doesn't listen or understand that he has been given some permission for in class, because he was sick, because he was in the cesspool, that he doesn't need to do certain things in the class at that time until he's recovered something. And sorry, there's this little fly. And I think it's interesting that he's sick, and he's sick for so long, and he's in the infirmary. He goes there for quite a while, and he learns that this Irish leader, Parnell, has died, who I wrote quite a bit about here. But before I get into him, which is going to take forever, I think the reason that he gets sick is because of the school, Ireland as a whole. All these things are just sort of nauseating for him as he's trying to figure out who he is and forge his own path. And, it's sort of a sick world. A lot of factors in his life: Catholicism, politics, his education, his family, all these different things are shaping him and molding him as he's trying to become who he wants to be. And it's tough and difficult, and I think that's sort of him getting sick in the cesspool, with all these bullies, the terrible misunderstanding teachers, and just everything else that he goes through is symbolic of the illness that one could feel as an Irishman, Irish woman of the time. So there's that. Anyway, Parnell. He was an I wrote some notes down. He was an Irish nationalist leader of the Irish Parliamentary Party, which was sort of independent from the Liberals and the Conservatives of the time. He was the leader from 1882 to 1891, which is a little bit before the story happens, because he dies during this book. And he was the leader of the Home Rule League, but his parliamentary party did adopt home rule from the Liberals, who were led by William Ewart Gladstone, who were committed to introducing home rule, and home rule was sort of self-governance for Ireland as part of the United Kingdom of England and Ireland and whatever else. United Kingdom and Ireland, whatever. Anyway, yeah, so Parnell was very big and popular in trying to introduce home rule for Ireland so that they could self-govern in a way. And the conservative parties thought constructive unionism would help alleviate the need for home rule. And from what I found, that there would be a bit of a problem with home rule because then the Parliament could be predominantly or dominated by Catholics, which is kind of strange to me because I did look into this and I didn't find some answers that I was quite looking for. I would have figured that a lot of them would be Catholic already. But anyway, we will talk about how the Catholic Church was quite powerful in England, or in Ireland of the time. And the reason for that, just to give a little backdrop, there was that concern, I guess. Though I would think that most of them were Catholic already. I didn't find the answer to what I was looking for, or I didn't find some, anyway. So yeah, that's home rule. There was that concern, which I guess, yeah, would give the Catholic Church more power, and possibly stop, from what I understood, from what I got, was that with the Catholic Church having a little bit more power in this sense, with home rule instead of leaders from England sort of making more decisions for Ireland, it might slow down the economic ability or economic growth for Ireland. So I guess that could be an actual legitimate concern. Even if the people were Catholic, they might, before there is home rule, they might, yeah, I guess it makes sense. But I don't know enough about it. And one good thing about this book is that it makes me want to read about Irish history, yeah? So thank you, James Joyce. I have something to thank you for. That's all I ask. So anyway, the reason Catholicism is so darn important, just a little bit of history. If I get into too many specifics, like I just tried to, we will lose the point and stop talking about the book. So Catholicism was introduced to Ireland a very long time ago. Long ago. But then, King Henry VIII wants to break away from Catholicism, and the Protestant Reformation changes everything, and he breaks away, and so England tries to bring Protestantism to Ireland, and tries to suppress the Catholics for centuries. But there's a problem in that Irish identity was sort of infused with their Roman Catholic identity. And so they come up with this plan called Catholic Emancipation to remove some restrictions for these Catholics, and so that there's not, some kind of uprising, a Republican uprising, right? Which ended up happening anyway, sort of later, much later than when they introduced Catholic Emancipation, which was, I didn't write the date down, but it was early 19th century, I believe. Anyway, this allowed the Catholic Church in Ireland to have a lot of power. And so, yeah, that was a long roundabout way of saying that the English did a lot of bad things to Ireland. And, yeah. Anyway, so that's sort of why the Catholic Church has a lot of power over people's minds, right? Stephen's mind. So if they have a lot of power in the Parliament, in in the self-governed home rule land of Ireland, that could be an issue. However, they did anyway, it feels like, because Parnell sort of lost favor when it came out that he had an affair. And all these Catholic bishops and everybody who was Catholic sort of disowned him and didn't want anything to do with him because he was so scandalous, you know. So, yeah. Anyway, strange times. Again, this book definitely made me want to read about Irish history because I don't know that much, but I digress. I did look up a little bit so that I could know all this, but I still don't know a lot. Anyway, so we've talked about all that. Now let's talk about the Christmas dinner with Stephen, and we'll get to another point in a moment from school that I want to talk about concerning the War of the Roses. So, at some point, Stephen goes back home for dinner, and my gosh, this has gone on for a long time. So sorry. But Stephen goes back home for dinner, and they start talking politics and Parnell, because while Stephen was in the infirmary, right, he learned that Parnell had died. So there's that. Anyway, they start talking about Parnell. And let me just read a little bit from here. I've got it highlighted. Yeah, can you see that? Cool. And they're talking about the Catholic Church and politics and how all these things are interconnected. And Stephen's just kind of listening to John, Mary, you know, Dante, all these people, Christy, whatever. Mrs. Riordan. I'll pay your dues, Father. Oh, wait. Who is this? That was good answer our friend made to the canon. What? Said Mr. Daedalus. I didn't think he had that much in him, said Mr. Casey. I'll pay your dues, Father, when you cease turning the house of God into a polling booth. Right? Maybe we want to have a little bit of separation of church and state of some kind. Maybe not, you know, have the Catholic Church have so much power, even though these people are Catholic, so it's a little strange. But they also, you know, they have these internal conflicts of, like, some people want Irish independence, which is at the forefront of everything here. That's what Parnell was fighting for with home rule and that kind of thing. God, I feel like I misspoke about something, and it's driving me insane because it's in the back of my head that I said something wrong. Anyway, when you cease turning the house of God into a polling booth. A nice answer, said Dante, for any man calling himself a Catholic to give to his priest. They have only themselves to blame, said Mr. Daedalus suavely. If they took a fool's advice, they would confine their attention to religion. It is religion, Dante said. They are doing their duty in warning the people. We go to the house of God, Mr. Casey said, in all humility, to pray to our Maker and not to hear election addresses. It is religion, Dante said again. They are right. They must direct their flocks. And preach politics from the altar, is it? Asked Mr. Daedalus. Certainly, said Dante. It is a question of public morality. A priest would not be a priest if he did not tell his flock what is right and what is wrong. So yeah, this interconnectedness of the church and the priests telling their flock, right, about politics, all this stuff. Parnell, his school, again, I said it before, probably 3 times, Parnell and his death, and Irish independence, and his education, and the Catholic Church, and this conversation, and all these moments in his life all come together to shape him. And maybe he doesn't want to go on the path that is being made for him, and that's the journey that we're going on. Certainly later when he's back at school and he gets punished unjustly, and he tells the head guy, the rector, about Father Dolan who punished him. He makes everyone happy. The boys all cheer him on, even though they've been kind of rude and bullying him the whole time. And then they leave him alone. And, you know, Stephen, in many ways, is kind of a lonely character. He's always wrapped up in his own thoughts, thinking about all the things that are happening around him, thinking about his place in the universe, thinking about God, observing what's going on at his Christmas dinner, at his place of education, Clongo's Wood School. And, you know, even when he's in school, there's this moment, just as an example, where they're talking about War of the Roses. Somehow the kids are divided up in a way, Yorks and Lancasters and all that, red and white. But Stephen thinks to himself about a green rose. Now, what could that mean, possibly? Well, probably, I don't know. When I think green, I think Ireland, right? So he's thinking about Irish independence. He has all these things in his mind. And we're going to see, you know, he's afraid of hell. He wants to go to heaven. There's this point, what does he say? I wrote it down, I know I did. Stephen Dedalus is my name, Ireland is my nation, Clongowes is my dwelling place, and heaven my expectation. So, you know, he's constantly thinking about all these things that are formative in his experience. And yeah, I'm just gonna, again, keep repeating myself over and over until my head turns blue, much like my shirt. And I've spent far too long talking about this chapter alone. So I'm quite glad that I don't have to do chapter 2, because I don't want to be spending 30 minutes on every single chapter. Anyway, like I said before, Noah will be talking about chapter 2 at Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, and then I will be talking about chapter 3 next week, and he'll be talking about chapter 4 next week, and then together in 2 weeks we will be talking about chapter 5. And yeah, I'll try to cut down on the asides, and this isn't my normal style. So I had it all organized, but then I, you know, started doing some asides and then being self-conscious about them and talking about them like I am now. So that's that for now. And yeah, so now that I'm done with all that, we can start talking about the good things about the book, yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, let's start.